Hello, and today I am going to talk to you guys about main deck boss monsters. So this is specifically looking at things that you can include in a Burning Abyss deck, but these kinds of things also might crop up in some of the Danger decks that we see. The Danger Thunder Dragon deck plays kind of similar build, but with the Thunder Dragon engine, obviously, instead of the Burning Abyss cards. And these are some cards that you might want to consider. So, starting off, Blast from the Past, we have Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. This guy is really great for damage, like 6,000 attack effectively, and he can be spot removal for even stuff that's like can't be destroyed. Used to be some really cool synergies on him being a warrior, so you could search him with Assault. Is good in multiples in that you could summon one, attack with it, and if you didn't win the game that turn, link it with a Dante, summon your Assault, and search another one for the next turn. Has some synergies if you're playing cards like Zephyros and Birdman in that you could summon him, use his Banish effect, take him off the field, and then summon him again and go for battle phase double attack. Guess on the downside, needs to have a light in the graveyard, and the effect only interacts with monsters. The Banish effect only hits monsters, and his other effect is just about attacking, so can't do anything about dealing with back row, but still, really impressive for a card that's nearly 15 years old. Next, we have Orbital Hydrolander. Now this guy is much newer, less than 2 years old now, still a 3k body, just like Blackluster Soldier, and this guy has removal effect for any card. Now that removal effect is not only a non-targeting effect, but it's also a quick effect, so you can use it on either player's turn, every single turn. And that means that it's kind of a more flexible card. You can summon it reactively into a board that your opponent has, or you can even use him as a card to play on turn 1, where you can put him onto the board and use him like a chained MST to an activation of a field spell. You take it out before it resolves and prevent any on-activation searches or things like that. Cards like Brilliant Fusion, you just take them out without letting them resolve. Now, obviously, this has got to come with some sort of downside. There is a big compromise on deck building. You either have to reduce the multiples of cards that you're playing in your deck, or you have to accept that it's going to be quite unreliable. And there's a lot of decisions to be made there. We know that with Fairy Tale Snow, you can increase your odds on this, but having to have no duplicates in graveyard for summoning, to activate the effect, and then to resolve the effect, it really takes a toll on the card. Just like a Blackluster Soldier, there are some cool synergies to be had. You've got Zephyros and Birdman, where you can take it off the board, summon it again. The effect has no hard ones per turn, it's just once per turn per copy. But also, if you're playing this in Burning Abyss, and you mill a Farfa either with his effect or with any other effect, you can target your Hydrolander, banish it until the end of the turn, and then when it comes back in the end phase, its effect is ready to go again, so you can use that effect in the end phase, and then pass turn, and it will be live again so long as you've not hit any duplicates. This guy, searchable with Witch of the Black Forest, only got 1500 defense. Now the errata on Witch says that you can't activate the effect of the card that you search, but you can still summon it. So if you link away your Witch from the field, you can search for Hydrolander, summon it, and then as soon as you pass turn, the effect is back online again. Now, for our third option, have Dark Armed Dragon. Going back to another old one here, this guy's almost 11 years old now, and like when he came out, he was one of the most expensive cards that the game had ever seen. Much more modestly priced now. Still got a lot of attack on him, 2800 as opposed to the 3k that we saw from the other two. But like he puts in a lot of damage. He's probably the most difficult to summon of all 5 cards that I'm going to look at today, but the payoff can be absolutely huge. Whilst you have to have exactly 3 darks in the grave when you want to summon him, and he banishes 1 dark from your graveyard to destroy any card on the field, this one does admittedly target with that effect. You're not limited in how many times you could use that effect. So like typically newer cards, we see lots of hard ones per turn effects. this has no once per turn on him whatsoever. So you start off with 3 darks, but anything that goes to the grave after you've summoned him, you can just keep banishing to destroy, banish, destroy. I've had games where I summon him and I destroy 6 or 7 cards on the turn that he hits the board, and then that just completely ends the game. So I think he has the biggest payoff for any of these boss monsters, but he is definitely the highest risk and the easiest to interrupt. He's still at 1 for some reason. I don't think anything would happen if we saw it go to 3, but yeah, you can only play 1. But you can search him. Like Hydralander, you could search him with Witch, but it wouldn't really do anything for you because if you can't use his effect, he's just a big vanilla. However, being a dragon rather than machine, you can search with Eclipse Wyvern for this guy. Something that I've played about with a bit recently, and it seems to work quite well. Next up, we have another big dragon, Lavinia. It's not one that I've found so attractive in recent times. And you can search him in the same way that you could with Dark Armed Dragon, but the effect doesn't seem to end this game in quite the same way that you would with Dark Armed. So he has 3 different effects, and they depend on how you summon him. You banish 3 monsters from your grave that are all either light or dark. If all 3 were light, you can special summon a monster from your grave in defense position. If all 3 were dark, you can return a card from your opponent's hand to the deck, and if they were a mixture of light and dark, you can destroy up to 2 cards on the field. That's another non-targeting effect, which is quite nice to have. And it can take out anything, so it kind of has an edge over Blackluster Soldier in that regard, in that anything is online. However, hallmark of newer cards, there's a hard once per turn on the effect, so if you draw it in multiples, it gets a little bit weaker. And the biggest downside for this is that on the turn that you use his effect, he cannot attack. So whereas these 3, you summon them, and they can put out some sort of interaction or push for huge damage, this one is either 0 damage if you use the effect, or a maximum of 3,000 if you don't. So it doesn't end the game in quite the same way that other boss monsters do, but it has a little bit of utility, and the Banish 3 Darks effect, to return a card from your opponent's hand to the deck, does give him an application if you wanted to summon him on turn 1, whereas something like Dark Armed or Blackluster Soldier would be completely dead, dropped on the board turn 1. And then finally, there's an option we don't see a lot of in people's main decks, is Dyna Wrestler Pancratops. Generally considered more of a side deck option, but I'm not entirely sure why. I think that if you were going for a build designed to go second, as we've seen quite a lot of recently, you could really be getting some value from this. It kind of gets a mixture of the benefits that we've seen from other cards, in that you can special summon him from the hand, he pushes for some damage, he's even got a quick effect for destruction, so you could use that in the battle phase. He has to tribute a Dyna Wrestler you control, so 9 times out of 10 that's just going to be himself, and target any card on the field to destroy it. The summoning condition, very different from the others for this guy, is a bit like Cyber Dragon. Your opponent has to control more monsters than you do. But for this guy, as we've talked about with newer cards, hard once per turn comes into play. The special summon effect can only be used once per turn, and also his destruction effect can also only be used once per turn. I think part of the issue with seeing this in a Burning Abyss deck is that even when you're going second, if your opponent only has 1 monster on the board, this will have to be the first thing that you summon to go against that. And that kind of interrupts what you'd want to be doing with the Burning Abyss monsters. So if you summon this first, you have to tribute him to get him off the board if you want to play any Burning Abyss cards from your hand. And ideally, you'd want your opponent to have 3 monsters to get full value from this. Because if you want to start with summoning a Rhino and a Burning Abyss monster, or a Graph and another BA, make your Dante and make your Detach to summon the Seer from deck, and then climb from there, you'd go to a Reproducus and the Dante on field, you're always going to have at least 2 monsters on your board. So to be able to special summon this after you're done doing everything that would have a Burning Abyss monster on your side of the field that would destroy itself, your opponent needs to have 3, and that's not the most likely. The only deck that would really be putting out 3 monsters on turn 1 and not just completely locking you out is Thunder Dragons. And having targeted destruction effects isn't the most effective there because they don't tend to have a lot of back row, particularly not in game 1. And the monsters that they have tend to be immune to destruction, so Pancratops isn't getting the best value there. So I think that might be why it doesn't have a niche in the meta right now, but maybe we'll see it come in if the decks change around a little bit. So on the overview, I think that my favourite out of the lot has to be Hydralander, just because the destruction is repeatable and it's a quick effect. You can use it as interruption as well. But what do you think is the most effective out of a lot of them? And is there anything that I've missed that you think would be an even better call than these 5? Cheers, bye.